The master of the Chinese martial arts, his name is Master Hung Yixiang. He said that Bodhidharma introduced into China the notion of Wu Te or martial virtue. What is this martial virtue? This Wu Te or martial virtue is nothing but Shastra Dharma, which has come from India and is now being translated well as the Communist Party has it. It's everything with Chinese characteristics. So I don't know whether to call it Chinese martial arts with Indian characteristics or Indian martial arts with Chinese characteristics.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the WARC Indian History Podcast. I'm Utkarsh.
Namaste, Sumedha here. As always, Utkarsh's partner, welcome, Swagat, to a fresh new topic.
Yes, and this is going to be a very interesting topic because this is going to be the two things. It's going to be the beginning of a series, and this is also going to be probably either our last or penultimate episode before a short break as well. And the topic, we've been discussing what are the things that people have been finding interesting in our podcast. We've been getting a lot of feedback from different folks. And one of the things that I have found that never ceases to astonish people, especially if I just talk to someone on the street or other friends that I know, is the origin or the Indian origin of so many different things in popular culture. In popular culture today, generally you attribute ancient Greece with everything from democracy to whatever else. It's the most popular thing. I was listening to some radio interview yesterday on growth hacking, and he was talking about these principles have been there since ancient Greece. I don't know what the ancient Greek people have to do with growth hacking, but that's Greece for you. And India isn't really thought about in that way. So the series that we're going to do is about the Indian origin of many different things, which are not necessarily even perceived as Indian today. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, which we are going to be very careful to do, is be as evidence-based and fact-based as possible. Because I'm suspecting a lot of people are going to raise their eyebrows at some of the things that we're going to cite. What do you think?
Yes, indeed. If you remember, Utkarsh, we in a way have already started this when we did the Indian origin of democracy.
Yes.
Or the Indian origin of calculus. And do you remember the kind of flack and abuse I told you I received for the one on calculus? So anyway, we are all ready for it. We will be, the only thing is that we will counter with facts. We are not going to get into emotions or we are not going to get into fights. We are just going to counter with facts. One has to remember that this is the oldest standing civilization. This is the oldest Bronze Age civilization, continuous standing for the past thousands of years. So, a lot of things would have come out of it. It's just common sense. It's also common sense that the passage of time has meant that a lot of dust has been overlaid on many of these origins. It will be our pleasure, and I hope yours, to brush off all that dust and bring out the truth for you.
Absolutely. And let's start this off with something that's literally striking at the heart of something else. No, but in a way. So think about Jackie Chan. That's what came to my head right now. Think about Hong Kong.
Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee. Think about Hong Kong Kung Fu movies. Think of all of that. Is there anything more associated with a lot of Chinese culture, to be very honest, especially in the second half of the 20th century, than martial arts, than Kung Fu? I can't think of anything, honestly. So,
Yes.
I was shocked when in an off-camera conversation, I was told that there is an Indian origin to this entire martial art, Kung Fu, Shaolin thing. And frankly, I did not believe it. And what I said is, I want to know more, but I'm going to literally hold back my curiosity, and I'm going to find out together with you, the audience, in this episode on what this truly is, what is the evidence, where did it begin, and is it really true that martial arts, Kung Fu, Shaolin, all of that has an Indian origin? So I'm going to let you take it away in any direction you like.
All right. So, when we say martial arts, what does it mean? It just means the art of fighting. So you can understand that this has begun with the beginning of human civilization, because humans have always fought with each other. But martial arts is unarmed combat as well as armed combat. This is it reached its apogee before the discovery and use of gunpowder. So this was when you had to fight with your hands. Sometimes you had a few weapons, you had different kinds of swords, and martial arts have some very different kinds of weapons also. Fighting is one of the oldest things that human beings have always done. So when you go back to the past in India also, and look at some of the traditions or stories we have, wrestling. So Lord Krishna, for example, he first showed his mettle by beating two wrestlers in the court of his Mama Kans. So that was Chanur Vad. He was one of the biggest wrestlers in the entire kingdom. And Krishna, as a young boy, had defeated him. So it shows you the roots of unarmed combat are very, very deep in this country. In fact, as usual, we will go back to the Dhanur Ved. The Dhanur Ved is the Upved of one of the four Vedas, that is the Yajurved. So this Dhanur Ved has in it all the art of fighting. So for martial arts, for unarmed as well as armed combat, you had the origin figure is Agastya Muni. Now Agastya and his wife Lopamudra are people who appear in the Rig Veda, and the fighting arts are all associated with Agastya. But the one which has had the maximum impact in India and which has remained up till the modern period is the one which exists in Kerala. So it's called Kalaripayat. And Kalaripayat is said to have been introduced to Kerala by Lord Parshuram, who came with a number of warriors. He established 3,600, it is said. There's a book called the Kerala Utpatti. This is the one which tells you all this. And then he established 108 Kalaris. So Kalaris are training institutions. A Kalari is basically the ground on which the training is done. It symbolizes the battleground. So this Kalari, 108 of them were established by Parshuram in Kerala. There are two, the northern Kerala style and the southern Kerala style, which we need not go into. But this is where it was established way, way back during the times of Parshuram. So at least 2,000, 2,500 years ago. There were also martial arts in different parts of the country, and even today there is a list of about 10, 15 which still exist. There's one in Tamil Nadu called Silambam, there's one in the northeast which is called Thangta, and there are some which survive in Punjab, there are some which survive in some different parts of the country. And there are also links of these with dance. So the ones in the eastern part of the country, some of their moves are the same as Chow dance. Chow dance is a folk dance of eastern India, of Jharkhand. So a lot of these martial arts have survived to some extent till today, but not very well, because many of them were outlawed and banned in the 19th century. So therefore, what happened was that, again, in the land of its birth, this had to go underground. There's a parallel with Buddhism. Buddhism was more or less wiped out in this country by the 10th, 11th century. Yeah, by the 10th, 11th century, it was more or less wiped out. But it lived everywhere else, and it is through Buddhism that a lot of the things that we are going to talk about today, it is because of the spread of Buddhism that so many of these things spread. So martial arts, the art of armed as well as unarmed combat, has its roots in the very making of the origin stories and the origin manuals of Indic civilization.
Can I just make one distinction here and confirm that this is your understanding as well, or maybe it's different? As you said, for all civilizations, people have been fighting forever. And there's a way to fight with your fists or with your body, and there's a way to fight with external weapons. Right? So I think it is fair to say that every civilization would have had some technique of fighting with their fists or fighting with weapons. The assertion and the claim that we will be making during the course of this conversation is that the specific set of techniques which are employed today in Shaolin Kung Fu or the other Chinese or North Asian martial arts have an origin point in India. So it's specifically
even Korean.
Even North
Korean,
Asia.
Japanese,
Yeah.
and Chinese.
Yeah. So
Korean, Japanese, and Chinese.
yeah, this is not to say that
Specifically.
other civilizations may not have different ways of fighting. We are just making a specific assertion that this technique has its origin in India, right? Am I understanding you correctly?
Uh,
Or am I
it's correct, but I would make a slightly stronger statement.
Oh, okay.
And let me just show you this book. It's a very interesting book, and it picks up the question you have just raised. That people have been fighting always, for always. So why do we pick out China, Japan, and Korea and say that the fighting techniques which came from India to these people are special? That's because across Asia, the impact and imprint of the martial arts techniques of India have been found in such a strong way that you have to say that the original ways in which all these people fought were changed completely. And they took over the principles of Indian martial arts with the caveat that they, of course, translated it into their own culture, into their own idiom, and into their own fights. But the imprint of the basic character of Indian martial arts is so strong that it can be seen very, very clearly once you start looking at it from this point of view.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
if you don't at all ever imagine that it has come from somewhere else, then you will never look for its origin somewhere else. So first you have to ask the correct questions, and then you will get the correct answers.
Okay.
So I would just like to make that stronger statement that because these fighting techniques were more efficient, they were adopted. And it happened to a large extent in Europe also, which again, this book which I showed you, it discusses, but that's a different story and it happened in a very different way. The ways in which these techniques took over everything else is the story we want to study. We
Okay.
want to hear
Okay.
today.
Okay.
So it's not as if it's common sense, you know. If I say that the Shaolin method of fighting was established by an Indian, there's bound to be a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
There's some people will just, you know, kind of not believe it. Other people will ask you, perhaps they have a more open mind, so they'll ask you for some facts. And there's a lot of ways in which people react, and sometimes chauvinism and perceived soft power have more to do with it. You know, so something which is accepted, say, in the 16th, 17th, 18th century by the Chinese will no longer be accepted today because they perceive themselves to be stronger or more powerful. So this is the battle of narratives and it goes on. But
Yeah.
I would like to, I will tell you some, original sources from where we know
Okay.
all this.
Yep.
So we come to the Indian origin of Shaolin. That's the story today, isn't it?
Yes.
So what did you want to know? I mean, what were the questions in your mind?
No.
Because I can approach the story in many ways.
So I want to ask basically three questions. One is, what is the if the origin point of Shaolin is actually India? What is that origin point? Maybe you referred to it already. Number two, how did it go from India to China? Number three, what is the proof, as hard evidence as possible, for point one and two?
Okay. So then we begin the story of somebody who is called Bodhidharma.
Okay.
So Bodhidharma is an Indian monk who lived in the 6th century. So there is always, some kind of confusion about the exact timings, of course. But there is somebody who claims to have met him, and he met him around 526 of the Common Era. So one assumes that he lived around that time. He is said to have been the third son of the Pallava king Skandvarman IV, who lived in Kerala, who was actually that kingdom was Kerala and a lot of other parts of South India. So he is said to be the third son of Skandavarman IV, the Pallava king of South India. Now he was not, as a matter of fact, a Kshatriya, because this family of Pallava kings actually traced their origins as Brahmins. So he was a Brahmin prince. So he in himself would have both the Shastra Dharma and Brahma, both Shastra and Brahma. You remember we spoke about them last time.
Yep.
That is power and the ability to use that power with wisdom.
Yep.
So he would have had both of these. Now the Pallavas were very important kings of the south. Their kingdom spanned about 600 years, say from 3rd century to the 9th century or thereabouts, and mostly in South India. And if you think of Kerala, remember that Kerala is a coastline, and there were trade routes from the coastline of South India up to China via the Malay Peninsula,
Yep.
and also reaching up to Japan from time immemorial. In
Just
fact,
hugging
this
the
is
coastline of Asia, basically, as you go up.
not just hugging the coastline. There's a bit of a long distance, and then it starts hugging the coastline.
So long
I'll
distance
just
is
show you
from-
this map.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll just show you this map so you can see how it goes. It's interesting to see that there is a land route and there is a sea route also. So both of these were active at that time. But our Bodhidharma is said to have taken a boat and gone via boat, and he reached up to Canton.
Okay.
He did not take the land route, but don't forget the land route because it's going to come in again.
Okay.
When you will very rightly ask me for evidence of whatever I'm saying, then the land route will come in. So
Okay.
he is said to have been born where today is modern Kanchipuram. Now Kanchipuram is a very old city. It may be modern today, but it's a very old city, very, very old. So he was actually born in Kanchipuram, and he grew up there, and he became a monk for reasons that must have been very peculiar to him, because he was he was not a very normal kind of person, as we will see when I tell you.
He was a
more of his
prince,
story.
right? So he became a monk. It must have. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, he was a prince. Yes, he was
Okay.
the third son, supposedly, of Skandavarman IV.
Okay.
So then he took that boat and he went from Kanchipuram up to Canton. Now, when he went there, he came in contact with the then the king over there, who was Emperor Wu. Now he had this interaction with Emperor Wu, but it was not a very pleasant interaction. Emperor Wu asked him to do certain things, commanded him to do certain things which he would not do. So basically, things did not work out. He left.
So did he
that
go
place.
there as a representative of his? It's
No. This was his own journey of self-discovery or travel, or
What? This is the equivalent
just
of a
seeing the
gap
world.
year of a. Anyways, no, I'm just putting a modern lens. Go ahead.
Well, much more than a gap year, perhaps a gap life, because he
Yeah.
left when he was very young and he lived for decades and decades
Okay.
in China.
Okay.
So from there, he went northwards. I'll show you the map again. He went northwards. He crossed the Yangtze River, and then he came to the Shaolin Temple.
Okay.
And it was in this Shaolin Temple that he established himself. And the Shaolin Temple was completely, after his stay over there, reorganized around his own principles. Now, what is the interesting thing that he did? He was a monk, right? So he was a meditator. So he joined the temple, and then he went and sat in front of a wall and just looked at the wall, it is said, for 7 years in meditation. That's all he did.
7 years.
For 7 years. 7 years, yes. So, Utkarsh, do you know the Daruma dolls in Japan?
No.
So,
I'll have to Google it.
so they are those. So it is said. So when he was
How do
called
you spell it?
Damo in Chinese,
How do you spell it?
Darruma, Daruma. dolls. I have one. I wish I could just. So I'll put a picture of it. I'll put a picture of my own Daruma doll over here because I
Okay.
got a couple.
Okay, I see it.
I got a couple when I was there. Yeah.
I think in my
So,
next visit to Tokyo, you have to look for one. Okay, yeah.
So can you see that it's just a round head?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's because while sitting there, it is said that his legs withered up. And he was left with just a head. But that's of course just a story. His
Yeah.
legs must very much have been there because he
Yeah.
was the one who taught the monks to fight.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he was called Damo.
Okay.
And Damo and Daruma. And
Yeah.
this was Bodhidharma. To give
Okay.
you a little bit more of a perspective, this Pallava dynasty, who called themselves Brahmins, they were Brahmins. Do you know who they traced their roots to? They traced their roots to Dronacharya, his son Ashwatthama. So
Okay.
Dronacharya was the guru and preceptor of the Pandavas
Yes.
in the Mahabharata.
Yes.
And his son Ashwatthama was their enemy. He was the one who had actually massacred everyone, all the Pandav progeny, so that only Abhimanyu's unborn son was left as the person to carry forward the lineage of the Pandavas. And there's a very interesting thing which links that to the Hungry Ghost Festival, which I will tell you next time when we do the origin of the Hungry Ghost Festival.
Which is a very
All
big thing
these
in
stories.
Singapore. In Singapore, by the way.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. So, this story of Ashwatthama killing everyone, that will lead up to another story, and that story will tell you the very, very deep origins of the Hungry Ghost Festival in the Mahabharata.
Okay.
So, today seems to be really a day of stories. So, now this Bodhidharma, you may ask, it was a Shaolin temple, but what's all this about fighting and what's all this about the martial arts?
Mm-hmm.
So, in those days, while traveling, you had to be very, very smart about taking care of yourself. Because there were a lot of problems which would beset you. So, you had to be a fighter. Also, people who could not fight used to keep bodyguards. And these bodyguards were mostly these warrior monks.
Mm-hmm.
The Buddhist warrior monks, these were the ones who also got taken on as bodyguards in this entire journey from India via Malaya to China, Japan, Korea, etc. So monks were very much expected to be able to take care of themselves. Then, say the Shaolin temple or any other monastery, they were in very remote areas, in jungles. So you had to save yourself from animals, you had to save yourself from bandits. So it was necessary for you to be able to guard yourself. Then, as you can see from the story of looking at the wall for 7 years, and it is said that he bore a hole through this wall because of his gaze of 7 years. So if you have to do such rigorous meditation, you have to be physically very, very fit. So for all these reasons, physical exercises were indeed necessary, not just popular but necessary in the monasteries and the temples. And so Bodhidharma established a series of exercises come fighting techniques in this Shaolin temple, which then became the basis of the Shaolin style of fighting. And then of course it went to Japan, where it was called Kung Fu. What was the basis of this? The basis of this were the martial arts techniques, Indian ones, that Bodhidharma had already learnt when he was a prince in Kerala.
So just to
And
make
all
a
these-
make a distinction here. So Shaolin by itself, so there's Kung Fu and there's Shaolin. And I'm not an expert on Chinese philosophy. Whatever I learned in university, I have unfortunately forgotten. So Shaolin is Chinese, right? It's the introduction of the martial art, which is what we're attributing to Bodhidharma, correct? That-
Yes.
Okay. So Shaolin,
What was your question?
no. So it's Kung Fu. Shaolin by itself, the philosophy underlying it is Chinese, is what I'm confirming.
No. So Shaolin is a philosophy. It's also a way of fighting.
Okay.
It's both.
Okay.
And this way of fighting is actually the more important part. That's why it's known today as a technique of martial
Okay.
art.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And it is the basis of many of these Asian systems of martial art, including when it went to Japan, then it became Kung Fu.
Okay. Okay.
So all these are martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
The philosophies underlying it are also similar, and these
Okay.
philosophies are also similar to
Hmm.
what is there in India.
Okay.
So, for instance, if you take Bodhidharma, what is Bodhidharma? What did he teach? So, there is a very famous sutra or a religious book, let's put it that way, which is called the Lanka Avatar Sutra, which is connected to Bodhidharma. This is the book which contains his teachings. So, what are these teachings? These teachings focus on meditation and yoga acharya.
Okay.
The word yoga gives it away, I think. That all these have their basis in the school of philosophy called yoga, which included in itself a system of exercises and meditation, which is, the eightfold path, yam, niyam, etc., etc. So, this is what Shaolin, the system of fighting, the philosophy, this is what Bodhidharma based it on. So we can read the Lankavatar Sutra if we want today. We can read Yogachar and its meditation techniques today, and we can connect them to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So
Okay.
that's as far as the connection is concerned. Now, how do we really know that this person existed? That this person went there and did all that? These questions are very normal. Anyone will ask these questions. So there are some answers to these questions. The most significant one or the most convincing one would be, I think, of someone who met him while he was alive and wrote about it at that time. Not somebody who sits in the 17th or 18th century and writes about him, but somebody who was a contemporary of his and met him at the time when he was living in the Shaolin temple and wrote about him. So now this, I will tell you who it was. So this person was called Yang Xuanqi. He was a Chinese citizen of Luoyang in modern Hunan. And
Sorry, is it
he
Luoyang?
wrote this
Loyang.
Luoyang, yes.
Oh,
Why, you
that's
know it?
No. There's an area in Singapore called Loyang. As
Oh,
in
okay.
Nanning, a lot of areas in Singapore is named after Chinese corresponding places in
Okay.
China. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So he wrote this book called Lo Yang Chia Lanchi. Excuse me for my wrong pronunciation. I am sorry, I do not know Chinese. In English, it is called Record of the Monasteries in Luoyang. And it
Okay.
was written in AD 547.
Okay.
So he once went to this place where the temple existed. This was the city of Luoyang. And he went up to the temple with the prefect of the city and met Bodhidharma, who by that time had become the Shraman. Shraman is the spiritual leader of the
Okay.
western lands.
Okay.
And he was called the Han of the kingdom of Posir, which is somewhere to the west. And basically, he was called the blue-eyed barbarian.
Blue.
That is how blue-eyed barbarian.
Why
That's
would he have blue
what it
eyes?
translates to. That's a very interesting question, because texts are copied many times. So whether it is a mistake or whether he was actually blue-eyed, because Brahmins from Kerala are often blue-eyed.
Really?
They can be blue-eyed. Yes. So
Or maybe it's green. I mean, many Indians have greenish eyes.
greenish
maybe-
eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Blue, I don't know, but greenish, I know many people.
So it is through the fact that the temple was built in 516 and it burned down in 535. It can be said that this meeting must have taken place between 516 and 528 of the Common Era. So this is somebody who met Bodhidharma while he was a great religious leader of the time and when he was living in that temple. Now, you know what one problem is, Utkarsh? All the records of the Shaolin temple were burnt down in 1928. They cannot be replicated.
Is this when
So
the
in
monarchy?
case
That's when did the last emperor of
that's
China?
post monarchy. I
Post
think it's
monarchy.
after the last emperor. Yeah, it's post monarchy.
Yeah. Post. It's definitely post
So
monarchy. Yeah.
yes. So if you want to go look at the original records of the Shaolin temple, well, you can't, because they've all burnt down. But it is the master of the Chinese martial arts, his name is Master Hung Yi-xiang. He said that Bodhidharma introduced into China the notion of Wu Te, or martial virtue. What is this martial virtue? This Wu Te or martial virtue is nothing but Shastra Dharma, which has come from India and is now being translated. Well, as the Communist Party has it, it's everything with Chinese characteristics. So I don't know whether to call it Chinese martial arts with Indian characteristics or Indian martial arts with Chinese characteristics.
Indian
whichever
martial
you
arts with Xi Jinping characteristics. Perhaps.
Today, yes, but perhaps not always. So the earliest people who wrote about him, one of course was this young Xuanzi. There is yet another person who is called Tanlin. He has also written about Bodhidharma. So in actual fact, the kind of evidences for Bodhidharma's existence are quite a few. It's not as if, somebody has just made it up out of thin air. And I will show you this picture of Bodhidharma, which is from a 13th century Chinese scroll. And you can see that he was not blue-eyed barbarian is a very good description, because he is seen to be a very bearded and bushy-browed and very grumpy-looking person. All his pictures are like this, so possibly he would have looked like that. So this picture is of Bodhidharma looking at the wall in this very, very fierce way, and it is said that he is listening to the ants screaming.
Okay.
Now, this scroll was painted in the 13th century under the Song dynasty. So I think that by now we can be sure that this was a person who existed, and he took certain traditions to China. He is called the 28th Buddhist patriarch if you count from Gautam Buddha.
Okay.
So he is the 28th Buddhist patriarch. That gave him a certain kind of spiritual and religious standing also. And I told you that his teachings then spread far and wide. His teachings spread from China to Japan to Korea. And this particular book that I have just shown you and I have referred to has sections on, what happened in China, which I have told you just now. Then there are sections on what happened in Japan and what happened in Korea. So the ideas kept on spreading. And the ideas changed according to the culture in which they were accepted. But their basic characteristics could still be discerned. And what were those basic characteristics? They were the same as I have discussed last time with a few additions. So power always has to be exercised with a lot of responsibility. So with great power comes great responsibility is a rip-off.
Of course it is.
So it's a rip-off, although it's a very famous and popular rip-off, so I'm referring to it. The idea remains, the principle remains. Power has to be developed through training, through meditation, through making your body, honing your body into the perfect machine. And parallel to exercising this power either for protection or for defense, there is also the idea of knowing the human body. So in Kerala, when it's called Kalari Payattu, connected with it is the idea of Adi Marm, which means I think there are 108 sensitive points, marm points in the body. So to press them or break them or twist them, these are techniques through which you incapacitate other people. So there's something over here, and if you give it a little twist, the person is dead. This is the most dangerous one.
Okay.
So this marm adi, the sensitive points are used for fighting, but it is also meant for chikitsa, which is medical help. So most of these people who are fighters are also traditional doctors. And this yoga, the idea of yoga and the principles of yoga, they come together with the principles of Ayurveda. In Adi Marm, and the ideas which went to the Shaolin temple or the ideas which went to Japan, these two traveled parallelly. The ideas of Ayurveda, so Sushrut in his Sanhita, Sushrut Sanhita, which is around say 3rd, 4th century before the Common Era, during Mauryan times, he is the first one to give that list of marm points of the body. The sensitive points, the weak points, the points which have to be protected, and the points which can be targeted by your opponent. He's the first one who gives that list. So you can see how all these ideas come together. That of yoga, that of Ayurveda, and the focus is the human body and the human mind. For the human body, there are physical exercises. For the human mind, there is meditation. And it is through mastering the mind and the body that these martial arts are actually mastered. Anybody who has seen any of the Jackie Chan movies or the Bruce Lee movies, or there's a what, the Karate Kid.
Yeah.
I think that's also a very popular movie, and there's a series on Netflix which is based on the Karate Kid. So all of them will focus on the mind. So these are all great ideas which have emerged from India, controlling the mind, controlling the body, and all of it coming together. And the imprint, like I said, see, I don't want to be, what can I say, very, very technical and tell you that, okay, this book and then this document and this was found in that document. But there's something which I must mention, which has been one of the big reasons why we have a lot of information on Bodhidharma, and we have a lot of information on the transmission of knowledge from India to China. So one was the sea route, which we have already seen. One is the land route, and that land route would go through Tibet. And remember that Tibet was a kingdom, a big kingdom of the past. Really
till the
big one.
1950s when China took it.
And it did not have always very good relations with China, but it was like, well, they coexisted. Now, there is a place called Dunhuang. This Dunhuang is just outside Tibetan territory, ancient Tibetan territory, and in Chinese territory. There is an oasis over there, the Dunhuang Oasis. Since it was an oasis, the people who were traveling through the land route from India to Tibet and then to China, they always used to stop over there. So that became a very big monastery come center for travelers to stay. It was like Ajanta Ellora in India. It was on a trade route, so there was place for you to stay, there was place for you to rest, then there was a monastery. It was basically a little beam of civilization in all that wilderness. So this Dunhuang was a very important center for a very, very long time. And it had a lot of caves, it had a lot of things which were happening in that cave. What happened in, I think it was 1900 or 1901, that there was a discovery made in one of those caves. It's called the Cave Library of Dunhuang. That Cave Library of Dunhuang gave us many documents, scrolls, paintings, etc. So let me just tell you the names, and for that I will have to wear my spectacles. In the Dunhuang Cave Library, documents from the 5th century to the 11th century were found in 1900. There were two Europeans, Orelstein and Paul Pelliot, who went there and who took away a lot of these things. So 1050 Chinese rolls, 11 Tibetan pothis, 80 packets of Tibetan rolls, silk paintings, textile pieces. Just by the way, one of the oldest Sanskrit manuscripts of the 1st century has also been found here. in the script from Gupta times. So there are also Sanskrit, Indian religious texts in Sanskrit, in Khotanese and in Kuchian. Then there is the earliest Buddhist Chinese art. From here, all this has also gone to Japan. Now, why is this important? This is important because it gives you not just the religious literature, but also folk tales, epics, secular literature, popular literature of China. And this popular literature was called Pian Wen. This Pian Wen, the popular literature which is not now no longer prevalent, it is through this that you can easily trace the Indian origins of so many of the ideas and so many of the stories and so many of the religious Buddhist ideas which went into China and then into Japan. So what happened was that in Japan, it went as the Japanese Setsuwa. I'm just giving you a few of these names so you get this idea. We have found this secular literature, Penvian, Chinese, which shows the Indian origins very, very clearly. So we see that Indian ideas have gone to China. From China, they have gone to Japan. And I hope that we can do some of these origin ideas in greater detail, Utkarsh, so that, some of the important Chinese epics which have also become very popular in Japan, such as the Water Margin. We can see the Indian impact and the Indian stories which are at the base of these epics.
That sounds very interesting. Yeah, we should do that.
Yes, it is very interesting. For here, the limited point is that in these Dunhuang documents from this cave library of Dunhuang, we have found a lot of information which pertains to Bodhidharma also. Bodhidharma, then who did he give his spiritual, who was his Shishya, who was the Shishya of his Shishya, like that, the entire lineage of gurus. All that can be found out from here, and there are a number of scholars who are still working on it pretty hard, and we can hope to get more and more insights from this. Utkarsh, the pity which I feel one of these things is a pity, that in India we are just not aware of the close connect that we have with China and with Japan and with Korea. We are just not aware of it.
Yeah,
and also
like alien cultures to many people.
Yes, and all of it went through the Malaysian peninsula. So there are very, very close links between the ideas of India of the past and then the ideas of even Northern Asia, definitely South and Southeast Asia. But it's a link which is not very explored. In my very short trips to Japan and to Malaysia and to Thailand, I found that they were not very willing to talk about this. And they would dismiss it immediately. If I asked the tourist guide something which I could see was Indian, I can see that the sculpture is Indian, I can see that the basis is Indian, but they would just dismiss it. They would, try to sell you dolls based on the Ramayana, but if you talked about the Ramayana, they would just dismiss it. So this has to be, I think, unearthed. Maybe we will be the ones to do it. We can focus on this India-Asia connect.
No, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, having lived in Southeast Asia for 20 years and having worked and lived in Japan for 5 to 6 years, it's the links are obvious to see for anyone who is even vaguely aware of Indian culture, as I am, just vaguely aware, unfortunately. But yes, we should definitely do it in more detail.
Yeah. So I don't know. Are you now at least slightly convinced that there was a historical person who went? He was called Bodhidharma and he took certain ideas with him?
No, I think Bodhidharma appears all over Chinese and Japanese history, apparently. Based on, a little bit that you mentioned and a little bit that I was also, what that I had looked up a little bit before I got to talk to you. So I think it's not such a big leap, right? If you think about it, today it's very interesting that you can fly directly from Japan to Bodh Gaya, right? There is an Indian origin to the metaphysical structure that many Japanese believe in. So why is it so difficult to then draw a line to say that there is an Indian origin to the martial art? So yeah, it does make sense. It's
No,
just not talked. Yeah.
I think what happened in, I would say, the latter part of the 20th century is that the Chinese made a very specific attempt to say that whatever came from India was okay, it may have come, but it came later, it was not so important. Our basic civilizational ideas were already in place. So the Indian ones are irrelevant, so to speak. They may have come, they may not have come. So you remember they were establishing Confucius centers everywhere, and they want to talk about other local Chinese religious ideas and philosophical ideas. They want to pretend that the Mahayana Buddhism, which came from India, was not important. But it's really not going to work, because it was not like this. After the Communist Party has come, of course, everything is very different. But if we want to go back even to the first millennium of the Common Era, even before the first millennium of the Common Era, there were links between the Indians and the Chinese, even during the times of the Mauryans. And even before that, because there's this group of stories, this story cluster called the Badkaha, which is supposed to have been written in a Prakrit language, say 8 to 900 years before the Common Era. It has so many stories of Southeast Asia. So many stories of Southeast Asia. One day we should just do a session of the stories from the Badkaha. And
Yes.
it may interest you to know that the stories of Sindbad the Sailor and Arabian Nights are all based on that.
Oh, so it's actually this side of the ocean, not that side.
It's both sides of the ocean.
Okay.
It went this side, and it went to Europe,
Yeah.
it went to the Gulf, and it also went to Southeast Asia. You see, Utkarsh, now I want to now put this map also out there. India was at the center of the entire world trade system. The Indian Ocean littoral has basically all the greatest civilizations of the ancient world over there. Just take a look at this. You have the Indian ones, you have the Gulf, you have China, you even have Egypt. And there were contacts between all these centers for 1 or 2 millennia before the Common Era. So ideas and stories were obviously going forth very, very clearly.
Yep. Yeah, it strikes me that sitting in 2024, you have past European propaganda, which is, I don't think it's being actively propagated as a matter of propaganda. It's been, in my sense, it's being propagated as a matter of what people's understanding are, which may be mistaken due to past factors. I don't think people are trying to specifically change history. They just have a wrong understanding of history, is my understanding, how I take it. The European view is what I'm saying, the Eurocentric view. But
Well,
on the
you're
other
being
hand,
very charitable. You're being charitable, but all right. I shall accept it.
no,
for
because
the
I'm being
moment.
charitable because I'm contrasting it to the other side of it, where the CCP is being very deliberate in crafting propaganda to suit the worldview that they want their citizens to tie by. Nothing like that is
To
happening
come
in the West.
back, to come back to Bodhidharma, it has happened, Utkarsh. It's not happening today. It has happened in the 19th century. This turning around and lying. So Richard, what was his name? Richard Burton, I think. No, I forget. But he translated some of the books, say, for example, the Kam Sutra, or he also translated the Arabian Nights. I forget the exact name. And he translated them wrongly, knowingly, in order to present the view that the British were always overlords in India. So it isn't as if the very focused tampering with history has not happened. It has. But it has also happened, has been done by the Chinese. And coming back to Bodhidharma, many scrolls were found in which Bodhidharma was presented, martial arts were presented. So they have tried to tamper with some of those scrolls to show that Shaolin temple martial arts existed before Bodhidharma came there. But these are very crude attempts at tampering with those paintings, and it can easily be seen that they are tampered with. So it all becomes, in the end, I think, perhaps a matter of national pride.
It is, absolutely.
Although I think we are much better off thinking that all of us live in one big world and we keep borrowing and exchanging.
Yeah, again, this is not, I don't really think this series or this conversation is Indian nationalism as such. It is not, absolutely not. Um, uh,
It's just interesting to trace origins, and
it is
you
interesting
get that
to,
kind of
yeah,
aha feeling. Oh
yeah.
my god, really? So when I read about the Hungry Ghost festival and its links to the Mahabharat, it was an aha experience.
Yeah, and aha for me was why were you so when you asked me that, I know that the Hungry Ghost Festival is, it's of course it's Chinese in origin, but it's not really practiced that much in China. Really, Singapore and Malaysia, basically the overseas
Yes.
Chinese are the ones who practice it. So I was very curious that
Yes.
why are you asking me about this obscure Chinese festival that happens only in Singapore and Malaysia? So
Yes.
I mean, this for me is almost like a triangulation. The fact that something like this comes up in your research, we've never talked about Hungry Ghost Festival,
No,
right?
no,
But
we
it's big
haven't.
here.
No.
It's massive here. Uh,
Yeah.
in that month that we have Hungry Ghost Festival, people are very careful. People do all sorts of
When
things.
is it?
I think it's in the second half of the year. I think is it September,
Okay.
October-ish?
Yes, we must have a special
Yeah,
session on all these things. Yeah.
yeah.
Festivals, maybe we'll do it around the time of the Hungry Ghost Festival.
Yeah. They say you should. Yeah, we'll talk about Hungry Ghost Festival in detail. The many
Yes.
superstitions here. Superstitions.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Good. So I think anything else you wanted to tell us about Bodhidharma?
No, I think I've told you the story of the prince who became a monk, and I think I've provided enough evidence, and I can provide some more in the description. They are very complicated Chinese and Japanese words translated and transliterated into English. So I did not want to clutter up the podcast with my very awkward pronunciations of these words.
Yeah, we'd
So
have to
maybe
get
I
a
will put.
yeah. We'd have to get a
I
language
will
expert for that, perhaps.
yes. So I will just try and put it in the description for people who are interested. The names of the original works that you can read, the names of the people, so you can read it over there. In the origin series that we are going to do, we must also do the Monkey King. Who was the Chinese Monkey King? What is the connection with India? So that's such a fascinating connection.
I didn't know there was a
In
Chinese
fact,
Monkey King, but okay.
yeah,
This
okay
sounds to me
then.
like an Indian
Okay
thing.
then.
Okay.
No, you will see how that is. It's foundational to a lot of Chinese thinking.
Yeah. What would be good, and maybe we'll get to that in the future, is I would really like to have this discussion together with a good faith discussion with somebody who is actually expert on Southeast Asian history or an expert on Chinese history. A good faith discussion. That would be great, right? Because maybe that person will have a much better, reading in
I
the
think
original.
the trouble is, Utkarsh, that in India people don't really bother themselves much with Southeast Asian history.
No, I'm talking about someone
And
from here, somebody like
yes,
in
it
Singapore.
will have to be somebody. Yes,
Because
it will have to be somebody from Singapore.
it has to be, because someone from China would have the pressures of the CCP. So it have to be someone in a neutral location like Singapore who can have a
Yes.
discussion
Yes.
to begin with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah, we can plan for that.
yeah.
But in India, like I said, the interest is very minor. And there's a reason for that, Utkarsh. Like I said, in the past, we were centers of the world trade flow. So we were interested in Asia, we were interested in Europe, we were interested in the Gulf. Once we were taken over by Islamic civilizations, they looked more to their own people. So a lot of Southeast Asia, Japan, China, etc. were kind of ignored. Once the Brits came in, they had a very strong interest in looking towards Europe, because obviously that's where they came from, and all their interests were in saving the northwestern frontier. So you have the Afghans and the Pathans, and then
Yeah,
the
yeah.
way from there to Europe. So we have unknowingly or knowingly just carried that forward, to the extent that about 20 years ago, the government of India had to think very, articulate very specifically a look east policy. Manmohan Singh had done that, and he was the prime minister, and this look east policy had to be articulated, because we did not look east at all. We just kept looking west. But we, Utkarsh, will look east.
And there's one more thing that I think we need to do, and I don't know how to do it. And it's not something me and you can do. We need to get a movie made on Bodhidharma. This sounds like the most epic movie ever.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Absolutely.
And especially if it's as accurate as possible, that will raise
It would be amazing. I wonder if anyone has ever made a film on Bodhidharma. I did not come across
I
it.
had not
at
heard of
all.
him till a couple of weeks ago, and it's
Yeah,
shocking.
I have not, because some of the other big Chinese travelers, for example, Yun Sang, a couple of movies have been made. And look at that series on Netflix, Marco Polo. So many series are being made on travelers. So Bodhidharma movie would be amazing, but not Hollywood, Utkarsh, please.
Yeah,
They have a tendency to massacre history.
that's true. Maybe we should write a script on Bodhidharma with all the stuff. Something to think about.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Wonderful. So on that note, we'll end it here. So will this be our last, or will we have one more episode at the
No, I
Hall?
think that we will have a short episode on Holi because it is good to talk about the origins of Holi also.
Yes.
And after that, Utkarsh, I am on a traveling spree across India. So there will be a break, viewers, for some time. But we'll be back. And in the meanwhile, we will keep releasing little clips for you, which we will do in a very interesting way, which you will love.
Yes. Wonderful. We'll see you next time then. Take care.
Namaste.